For many of our clients here at MediSci, a word that comes up often is stress. I think when I say stress, most of us can think of at least one situation that is really weighing on us that we're not quite sure how to approach. And in fact, according to Stats Canada, around 1 in 5 Canadian adults experiences stress quite a lot or extremely on a daily basis. But so, what do we mean when we're talking about stress? And how can we optimally manage stressful situations when they do come up? Well, according to some of the most influential researchers on the topic, the experience of stress is subjective, and this is because it has to do with how we size up situations that we come across and also whether we feel equipped to handle them. So, for instance, if we have a big exam to write and we perceive it as a challenge to overcome and we feel prepared for it, we're likely to feel a little bit stressed, but ultimately that can motivate us and be helpful to our performance. On the other hand, if we see the exam as a huge threat, if we feel underprepared, we're likely to feel pretty stressed out. So then one of the key components here to intense or this kind of negatively experienced stress is the feeling of being overwhelmed. It's when we feel that we don't have the resources needed to deal with whatever it is that we're confronted with. And this can happen in all kinds of situations. This can be projects at school or work. It can be in conflicts with friends or romantic partners. It can be when we're sick. It can be when we're moving. We can even experience stress when we're getting ready to go away on vacation. So we talked a little bit about what stress is, but how do we deal with stressful situations when they do come up? How do we cope with them? Well, in general, we can categorize our coping strategies into two main sorts. So we have problem-focused coping strategies. This is when we're really going to take an active approach. We're going to tackle the stressor head on. We're really going to engage with it. And this can be things like seeking more information on the problem, brainstorming solutions, making a plan of action. We also have our emotion-focused strategies, and this has to do more with managing our feelings about the stressor. This can be things like seeking out social support, so from our friends or family. It can be practicing self-care. It can be reframing the situation into a different light. But so then, which type of strategy should we be using? Ultimately, and maybe unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you on that. It's not possible to say we should be using this one or this one in all cases. And that's because it's important for us to consider how a problem or emotion-focused coping strategy fits the situation at hand. Let's consider the example of a person who was just laid off from their job. Pretty unexpected and jarring. This person could initially benefit from using emotion-focused coping strategies to get some support, maybe practice some relaxation to manage their distress, do some pleasant activities to take their mind off things for a while. As they process their emotions and they start to come to terms with the situation, the person may then be better equipped to use their problem-solving skills. So they can kind of shift to this new problem-solving approach. This would be things like taking steps to look for a new job. So again, the ideal coping strategies to use will really depend on the fit with the stressor or the part of the stressor. And in fact, our strategies that we're using may shift or change over the course of the same stressor. But so how do we really know which strategies to use in a given situation or at a given point in a situation? How do we choose? There are different schools of thought about this where in some respects it seems that people tend to have a pretty predictable or regular coping style. So these are the coping strategies that they tend to reach to across a lot of stressful situations. On the other hand, there may be certain aspects of certain situations that draw upon different strategies for us to use other than our regular coping style. So for instance, you may be someone who's really a problem solver, you're faced with stressors at home or at work, and you really tackle it head on. But then when a health scare comes up or you're going to the doctor, this is when you feel the need to kind of reach for those emotion-focused strategies. So everybody's a little bit different. But in the last part of today's video, I want to leave you with a framework or kind of an exercise for being a bit more intentional and mindful about the coping styles or strategies that you use. You can do this exercise if you're simply interested in knowing more about your coping style, or when you find yourself kind of butting heads with your stressor. So maybe you're confronted with a stressor and you're not making a lot of progress. Maybe what's going on is that there's a mismatch between the coping strategy that you're using and the aspect of the stressor. So for each of the 3 steps of this exercise, it can be helpful to write them down. So in a journal, on a piece of paper, or on your phone where it's somewhere that you can kind of carry it with you. So as a first step to figuring out how to cope with a stressor, we want to clarify what the stressful situation is in specific terms. For instance, if we say something like, I'm stressed about my health, This is pretty general and it makes it more difficult to know how to approach the situation. So we can use questions like the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why, to help us clarify what situation we're talking about. So saying something more specific like, I was stressed this week when I experienced intense nausea as a side effect of my new blood pressure medication, and I'm particularly stressed because I know that my doctor's office is only open after the weekend on Monday. So articulating what we're specifically stressed about can allow us to understand what we need to address. And it can also be a helpful first step in breaking down big, complex stressors into more manageable pieces. So that's step one. We're going to want to clarify what the specific stressor is. As a next step, we want to understand what aspects of the stressor are changeable or under our control and which are not. So using the same example, we might list out that the unchangeable or uncontrollable aspects of the stressor are that we have high blood pressure to begin with, that we're currently experiencing nausea, and that we also have to wait until Monday to see the doctor. These are facts about the situation that we can't change. But what we can change is how we're managing the nausea, maybe the time of day that we're taking our dosage of medication, and also the amount of information that we have about the medication and its alternatives. So again, breaking down the changeable and unchangeable aspects of the situation is a great second step. As a final step, we generate and choose our coping strategies using the 3O approach. So options, outcomes, and order. We begin by coming up with all of our options for coping strategies. So regarding the unchangeable parts of the situation, we can draw on our emotion-focused strategies, reaching out to a friend for some support, practicing some relaxation or self-care techniques, maybe seeking out some distraction, things like listening to music, watching a movie, doing something that makes us feel good. Regarding the more changeable aspects of the stressor, we can take care of our side effect symptoms. We can manage that nausea. We can prepare a list of topics to bring up and discuss with the doctor on Monday. We can access some information about treatment alternatives online. These are the more approach-oriented strategies we can use. Then in a final step, we will consider the possible outcomes for each option and finally order the options. So again, remember, we're generating options, we're looking at the outcomes, and then we're ordering them. Again, something that you can do written out somewhere where you can really reflect on it and see it written down in front of you. So to sum up today's video, we've talked a bit about what stress is and how we experience it, and we've also talked about different ways of coping with stress. So if you find yourself bumping heads with a stressor, maybe the coping strategy being used isn't a great fit. Maybe there's an attempt to problem solve something unchangeable or vice versa. By breaking down the stressful situation into specific terms and then using our 3 O's to generate ideas for coping, ultimately we can be better equipped to manage stressful situations. So thanks for listening to this video and I hope that you found it helpful.